The dietary landscape of the modern world is heavily anchored by the ubiquitous white potato, a staple crop that is culturally perceived as a benign, foundational vegetable, yet functions within the human body as a highly refined, aggressive metabolic disruptor. To understand why substituting the standard white potato with the sweet potato fundamentally alters your body's blood sugar response, one must dive deep into the microscopic architecture of these two entirely different botanical families and observe how their distinct carbohydrate matrices interact with the human endocrine system. The standard white potato belongs to the nightshade family and is primarily composed of a specific type of starch known as amylopectin. At the molecular level, amylopectin is constructed as a highly branched, chaotic tree of glucose molecules, bound together by easily accessible alpha-1,4 and alpha-1,6 glycosidic bonds. When you consume a baked, mashed, or boiled white potato, the digestive intervention begins immediately in the oral cavity. The salivary enzyme alpha-amylase encounters these highly branched structures and, because the surface area of amylopectin is so vast and exposed, the enzyme cleaves the bonds with devastating speed and efficiency. By the time this bolus reaches the acidic environment of the stomach and passes into the duodenum, pancreatic amylase finishes the job almost instantaneously, reducing the complex carbohydrate into a flood of pure, unadulterated glucose. This rapid enzymatic destruction results in a massive, uncontrolled deluge of glucose entering the mesenteric veins and surging into the systemic circulation. This is not a slow infusion. It is a glycemic tsunami hitting the pancreas. Beta cells within the islets of Langerhans detect a critical emergency. The bloodstream is only designed to hold approximately 1 teaspoon of glucose. Anything significantly above this threshold is toxic, causing osmotic damage to the vascular endothelium and stiffening the arterial walls. To neutralize this threat, the pancreas is forced to secrete a massive compensatory pulse of insulin. Insulin acts as the biological key that unlocks cellular doors, violently driving the glucose into the muscle, liver, and adipose tissue. However, this hyperinsulinemic response initiates a metabolic catastrophe. The sheer volume of insulin overcorrects blood sugar levels. This is reactive hypoglycemia, a state of cellular starvation that triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This results in the debilitating fatigue, brain fog, and intense sugar cravings typically experienced in the mid-afternoon. Destructively, high insulin completely paralyzes lipid metabolism, locking the doors of your fat cells and preventing the release of stored energy. Simultaneously, excess glucose is shunted into the liver, where it is converted into fatty acids via de novo lipogenesis. Finally, these are deposited as visceral adipose tissue, cementing the metabolic emergency into long-term fat storage. The intervention of switching entirely to the sweet potato, which is not a nightshade but a member of the morning glory family, completely dismantles this pathological cycle. Its biochemical superiority lies in its fundamentally different starch architecture. Instead of the chaotic, highly branched amylopectin, the sweet potato is incredibly rich in a starch called amylose. Amylose is constructed as a tightly packed, linear, unbranched helical chain of glucose molecules. Because these molecules are packed so densely, water struggles to penetrate the starch granules during the cooking process. More importantly, human digestive enzymes struggle to access the glycosidic bonds. When a sweet potato enters the small intestine, pancreatic amylase cannot rapidly dismantle it. The enzyme must laboriously work its way down the linear chain, cleaving off glucose molecules one by one. This structural resistance is further fortified by the sweet potato's extraordinary soluble fiber matrix. As the soluble fiber mixes with digestive fluids, it hydrates to form a thick, highly viscous, mucilaginous gel. This gel coats the inner lining of the duodenum and physically encapsulates the starch molecules. This gel acts as a biological time-release capsule. It slows gastric emptying and creates a physical barrier that restricts interaction between enzymes and carbohydrates. The physiological result of this dense amylose structure and viscous fiber gel is a slow, steady, and highly controlled drip of glucose into the bloodstream. Because there is no sudden surge in blood sugar, the pancreas is never pushed into a state of emergency. It releases only a modest, basal amount of insulin, just enough to gently guide the circulating glucose into the demanding muscle and brain cells. By preventing the massive insulin spike, the sweet potato allows the endocrine system to remain in a state of calm homeostasis. There is no reactive hypoglycemia, no mid-afternoon energy crash, and no subsequent cortisol-driven panic for more sugar. Furthermore, because insulin levels remain low and stable, the enzyme hormone-sensitive lipase remains active. This means that while your body is slowly processing the energy from the sweet potato, it retains the metabolic flexibility to simultaneously oxidize stored body fat for fuel. This completely bypasses the fat storage lock that the white potato inevitably triggers. But the most profound medical transformation occurs when this dietary substitution is maintained consistently over a period of 30 days or more. The daily avoidance of hyperinsulinemia allows the body to undergo a fundamental cellular reprogramming. In individuals who have consumed a diet high in fast-digesting carbohydrates like white potatoes, the constant bombardment of high insulin causes receptor downregulation. To protect themselves from the toxic influx, the cells essentially reduce the number of active receptors, a condition known as insulin resistance. When you switch to the slow-release profile of the sweet potato, this constant receptor bombardment ceases. The cell membranes, specifically in the skeletal muscle and hepatic tissue, are granted a biological reprieve. Without the constant flood of insulin, the tyrosine kinase activity of the insulin receptors begins to recover its sensitivity. Over weeks, the cells upregulate receptor density. This means your body requires less and less insulin to manage the carbohydrates you eat. This restoration of insulin sensitivity is the absolute cornerstone of reversing prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, and systemic inflammation. Simultaneously, the daily consumption of sweet potatoes introduces a highly potent endocrine modulator into the system. Clinical research demonstrates that the specific nutrient profile of the sweet potato stimulates the adipose tissue to increase the secretion of a protein hormone called adiponectin. Adiponectin is often referred to by metabolic researchers as the ultimate fat-burning and anti-inflammatory hormone. It circulates in the blood and binds to receptors on the skeletal muscle and liver, where it activates an enzyme called AMP-activated protein kinase, or AMPK. AMPK acts as a metabolic master switch. When activated by adiponectin, it commands the cells to instantly halt the storage of fat, increase the uptake of glucose directly from the blood without needing excess insulin, and dramatically ramp up the beta-oxidation of fatty acids within the mitochondria. By shifting to the sweet potato, you are not merely avoiding a sugar spike. You are actively upregulating the biochemical pathways that command your muscles to incinerate fat. This metabolic overhaul is continuously protected by the massive antioxidant payload delivered by the sweet potato's deep orange flesh. The coloration is the result of an extraordinarily high concentration of beta-carotene, a provitamin that the liver carefully converts into active retinol. The years of eating high glycemic foods like white potatoes invariably leave behind a legacy of microscopic damage within the vascular endothelium. The beta-carotene from the sweet potato, along with its high levels of vitamin C and manganese, enters the bloodstream and acts as a systemic fire extinguisher. These antioxidants circulate through the capillary beds, donating electrons to neutralize the highly reactive oxygen species that are damaging the blood vessels. Over 30 days, this continuous antioxidant therapy significantly lowers the levels of C-reactive protein in the blood, a primary clinical marker. It targets the chronic, silent inflammation that drives cardiovascular disease and accelerates cellular aging, leaving your body rejuvenated and protected. Ultimately, the permanent change in blood sugar response is not a temporary dietary trick, but a literal structural and hormonal renovation of the human metabolic engine. By eliminating the volatile amylopectin of the white potato and embracing the resilient amylose and fiber matrix of the sweet potato, you completely rewrite the signals that your gut sends to your pancreas, liver, and brain. You dismantle the biological mechanisms of reactive hunger and fat accumulation, replacing them with a system characterized by steady, durable energy and heightened insulin sensitivity. The mitochondria within your cells learn to operate with profound metabolic flexibility, seamlessly shifting between utilizing the slow-drip glucose provided by the complex starch and burning the triglycerides mobilized from your adipose tissue. You escape the exhausting, destructive cycle of postprandial spikes and crashes, allowing your neurochemistry to stabilize and your cardiovascular system to heal from the relentless sheer stress of hyperglycemia. This single dietary substitution represents a profound mastery over human endocrinology, proving that the structural geometry of the carbohydrates you choose to ingest dictates the entire trajectory of your metabolic health, cellular longevity, and biological resilience.